do you see any way in which blockchain technology could be used, or is it just, again, like you said, like the technology doesn't matter, and SPACs maybe just solve the problems that you see?
The technology doesn't matter. The outcome matters. In this case, what the outcome is that matters is the following. There were 8,000 or 9,000 public companies in 2000. There are about 4,000 now. 2/3 of the S&P 500 have no R&D budgets. Now, you can say, well, this is a stock market problem, but I actually think that this is a US economic problem, which is that we don't have capital markets that can support young, high-growing, fast companies in a way that really builds for the future of America, the resiliency of America. And so we need thousands of companies to go public. And so we need to frame the capital markets in a way that they understand why they should be buying future growth and product iteration and R&D versus current cash flow. It's this obsession with current cash flow that has driven the private equity boom, that has driven the debt boom, that has driven 8,000 companies to shrink to 4,000, and that has driven a lot of unnecessarily volatility in the public equity markets. So by building this platform, this IPO 2.0 platform, what I would really like to do with my partners is sort of pioneer a way for young, high-growth companies who can invest lots of money over the next 5 to 10 years to go public. And the way that I do it is we pre-wire the IPO. We go and we curate investors. We explain what we're trying to do. We explain the dynamics of the market. Then we go and find a target company. And then we break the business model down for these folks. We price it in a way that's fair. And we eliminate a lot of the overhang in the stock, like things like lockups and whatnot. So there's benefits to the CEO and founder, which is that they get better understood in the public markets. So then there's more long-term support. They get to go public in 90 days versus 18 months. And it's just a much lighter weight process. And then for the public markets, what's really important is and I'm using sort of, my accumulated quote unquote social capital and credibility to say, let me explain to you why you want to own this thing for 5 to 10 years. And look, I can only do this one company at a time. Although in this current case, the first one was Virgin Galactic. It's been a real success. I raised 2 more SPACs, and so we'll see what happens. I'd like to raise, some more after that. But by doing this incrementally, I think that I'll help educate the smartest hedge funds and mutual funds to want more of these younger businesses. And then younger businesses will be less afraid of going public sooner. And that'll start to turn the capital markets momentum in favor of long-term growth. And that has huge ramifications because then hedge funds will tell companies, invest more in R&D, and that actually has huge implications for the US economy. So to me, it's all about that. ICOs, I felt, and I still feel, are arbitraging something in a very shady gray market and a poorly understood part of the financial ecosystem for the gain of a few. I don't think that many of these things will stand the test of time, and I think that there'll be non-trivial amounts of fraud and stealing essentially and lying, and these things underlie nothing. They don't really represent real businesses. And so I just it's kind of like penny stocks. Do they exist? Sure. Would I tell any reasonable, smart investor to focus on them? No. Would I tell my grandparents to go buy them? No.
And so one other thing I wanted to ask was to just sort of bring together 2 strands we've been discussing, because you've been saying that the way out of the coronavirus pandemic is to turn to resilience, and how you feel that this will probably drive more nationalism because it's exposed how fragile our supply chains can be. But as we've just been talking about, when I asked you the question about Web3, you did also say that you felt that there would be a drive toward decentralization. But, generally, at least in my world, that means these like borderless crypto networks, which is obviously quite different from something more along the nationalist line. So I just wondered how you thought those 2 trends would intersect.
I think that, governments will basically push businesses to be more resilient, which really means that they'll have to insource a lot more work, and they'll have to do a lot of things onshore. Because they'll want to view things through a lens of national security, and economic incentives will probably motivate people to behave that way. I think separately, people will put a lot of pressure on China at every single part of the sort of economic value chain in which China plays an enormous role, and there are many, and too innumerable to count. And all of that will force companies to do the more resilient, less profitable thing. And so, that's sort of where the world is going. On top of that, though, there will be a handful of folks that do build multinational products because they are, to your point, which is very accurate and true, borderless. These are online products mostly. But I think what will happen is the economics of those products will converge to zero, and the economic value associated with them will converge to zero, and they will become highly transparent and monitored by governments, and they will behave no different than the payment rails and other networks that we have today. It is the case that, when you make a wire buying between two parties or between two countries, the DOJ can figure that out in a nanosecond, and the FBI and everybody else, and they can figure out who it is, and government institutions work together to basically provide transparency. And I think all of these sort of borderless user-based networks will end up doing that, not necessarily because they want to, but because they'll be forced to. And I think all governments will align on that.
By far the best investment you can make is in yourself. If you invest in yourself, nobody can take it away from you.